The sun had begun its slow descent over the rugged horizon, casting long golden shadows across the rolling fields of the ranch. Dust swirled gently in the warm breeze, settling on the worn boots of the rancher as he moved methodically across the paddock. The animals stirred at his presence, their low murmurs a familiar soundtrack to his day. But today, something felt different. The tension in the air was almost tangible, a quiet electricity that threaded through the ranch like a wire under strain. She appeared at the edge of the barn, hesitant but determined, her fingers clutched at the hem of her dress, knuckles white from the grip, eyes darting away from him even as she tried to muster courage. The rancher's gaze followed her, steady, unwavering, a mix of curiosity and anticipation in his weathered eyes. He had seen her hesitation before, understood the boundaries she tried to maintain, but there was a spark tonight that demanded attention, a silent invitation he couldn't ignore. "Don't touch me there." Her voice trembled yet carried an edge of defiance, a delicate mix of fear and desire. The rancher paused, reading the unspoken lines of her body, the rapid heartbeat visible in the subtle twitch of her shoulders, the shiver that ran down her spine despite the warmth of the evening air. He moved closer, slow and deliberate, not to intimidate but to close the distance that had been stretching between them like a taut rope. Her breath caught as he stepped forward. Every muscle in her body seemed to resist, yet betray her own instincts. She wanted him to stop but wanted him to continue at the same time, the contradiction pulling her in two directions, making her tremble uncontrollably. The rancher's hand hovered just above her, the rough warmth of his palm a sharp contrast to the softness of her skin. One deliberate motion, and he brushed against her arm, eliciting a startled gasp that seemed to echo across the silent ranch. "Relax," he murmured, his voice low, measured, carrying authority without command. She swallowed hard, fighting against the rush of sensations that threatened to overwhelm her. His hand moved with careful precision, testing limits, reading reactions, gauging hesitation against desire. The tension between them thickened, every movement weighted with expectation, every glance a silent negotiation of unspoken rules. The sun dipped lower, painting the barn in streaks of amber light, illuminating the sweat that gathered at her brow, the quickening of her breath, the wild tremor in her hands. Each second stretched longer than the last, a slow-burning fuse leading to an inevitable spark. Her protests had softened, her voice barely a whisper now, and the rancher noted it, adjusting his touch just enough to keep her on the edge, balancing between defiance and surrender. She wanted to pull away, wanted to assert control, yet every instinct betrayed her. The roughness of his hands, the certainty in his movements, the sharp awareness of his presence, it was intoxicating, terrifying, thrilling all at once. She trembled wildly, trying to maintain composure, but her body had begun to betray her, responding before her mind could catch up. His eyes met hers, steady, unyielding. There was no cruelty in his stare, no malice, only understanding, patience, and the quiet assertion of someone who had read countless signs of hesitation, desire, and fear before. He moved again, a measured advance, and her resistance wavered further. A subtle shift in her stance, a catch in her breath, the faint arching of her back, all signals he noticed, all used to guide the next move. The barn doors creaked in the breeze, adding a rhythmic punctuation to the mounting tension. Shadows danced across the walls, mirroring the quiver in her hands, the tremble in her lips. She tried to look away, tried to reclaim the power of refusal, but the pull of his presence was magnetic, irresistible, a force that bent her will while respecting it. Her pulse raced, her senses heightened. Every brush of his hand against her skin sent shivers up her spine. The rancher's movements were deliberate, each touch carefully measured, balancing on the knife edge of consent and control. Her mind screamed caution, yet her body betrayed her, trembling, responding, betraying the very boundaries she had tried to uphold. And in that moment, under the fading light of the western sky, time seemed to slow. The world outside the barn ceased to exist. There was only the two of them, the electricity between hesitant touch and unspoken desire, the silent negotiation that neither voice could fully articulate. She trembled wildly, and he observed with quiet authority, guiding, testing, drawing her into a rhythm she didn't know she wanted yet couldn't resist. The barn was cloaked in the deepening shadows of twilight, the air thick with the scent of hay and earth. Every creak of the timber seemed amplified in the quiet, each sound punctuating the tension that hung between them. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, breaths shallow, almost desperate. She wanted to resist, wanted to assert control, but every instinct in her body rebelled against restraint. The rancher had a way of reading her like an open page, understanding the subtleties that she couldn't even name aloud. He stepped closer, the soles of his boots scuffing softly against the dirt floor. Each deliberate movement made her tremble more, her fingers tightening against the folds of her dress. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly, though his voice carried a promise she couldn't quite define. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her effort. Every brush of his rough palm against her arm sent shivers racing through her, igniting nerves she hadn't expected to feel so acutely. She drew a shaky breath and whispered, "Stop, please." But the word came out weak, unconvincing, even to herself. The rancher paused just long enough for her to notice the decision he made to continue, but carefully, deliberately, respecting the line she feared crossing. His touch was measured, precise, and yet somehow it penetrated deeper than the surface, reaching her hesitation, her curiosity, and her desire all at once. Her back pressed lightly against the wooden post of the barn, the rough grain scratching her skin, grounding her as her body betrayed her mind. He adjusted his stance, leaning in without overwhelming, testing the boundary between her defiance and the pull of her surrender. She trembled uncontrollably now, a storm of emotion she could neither hide nor resist. Every movement he made was a silent question, and every gasp, every shiver was her answer. "You're trembling," he murmured, his lips near her ear, not teasing, but stating an observation that made her shiver even more. Her eyes darted away, ashamed and thrilled at the same time. She wanted to escape, to regain control, yet the magnetic pull of his presence kept her rooted. The barn, the fading sun, the creaking beams, they all faded into the background, leaving only the two of them, caught in a delicate dance of hesitation and boldness. Her breath hitched as his hand traced along the line of her shoulder, careful, precise, never crossing into territory she hadn't yet permitted, yet always nudging her limits. The tension mounted with each touch, each soft murmur from the rancher, until her defenses were fragile, almost non-existent. She trembled wildly, and he could see it, feel it, respond to it, shaping the moment into a rhythm only they shared. Her voice broke. "Please, I don't know if I can," and he silenced her with the gentlest of gestures, a palm over her hands, holding them against her body. The intimacy was electrifying, terrifying, but she could not deny the thrill of it. Every nerve in her body was alive, every heartbeat a drum of anticipation. He moved closer, leaning down so that their foreheads nearly touched, and she caught herself wanting the contact, needing it, even as fear still whispered in the back of her mind. The twilight deepened, and shadows stretched across the barn floor, mirroring the trembling of her limbs, the quickening of her pulse. He spoke softly. "It's all right. You're safe." But there was a strength behind his words that reassured yet thrilled her, a steady presence against her chaotic emotions. She trembled with a mixture of fear, anticipation, and a strange exhilaration that only someone who truly understands your limits can provoke. The rancher's hand moved subtly, brushing along her side, tracing lines that sent tiny shocks through her body. She gasped, a sound that mingled reluctance with excitement. Her mind wavered, torn between warning him away and surrendering completely to the tension that coursed through her veins. Every glance, every measured motion from him was a challenge, an unspoken question: how far could she let this go? And every tremor of her body, every involuntary shiver, was her answer before she could even speak it. He observed her reactions with unwavering focus, understanding the silent language of her body, the nuances of hesitation, the flickers of desire she could not voice. His touch was deliberate, never cruel, a masterful dance along the edge of restraint. Each moment they shared seemed to stretch time, a suspended reality where only the tension between touch and denial mattered. She trembled wildly, almost in disbelief at the intensity of her own reactions, and he responded accordingly, guiding, holding, testing, yet never breaking the fragile boundary she had set. The barn creaked again as a breeze pushed through the cracks, the scent of earth and hay wrapping around them like a cloak. She leaned slightly into him without realizing, seeking the warmth, the stability, the undeniable pull that kept her trembling despite every protest. The rancher noticed, his hands adjusting to her subtle movement, his eyes locked on hers, silently communicating that he saw, understood, and accepted her wild, trembling surrender. Her resistance ebbed, her body betraying her again and again, responding to his touch even as her mind tried to cling to caution. Each gasp, each tremor, each quiet moan was a confession, unspoken yet profound. He leaned in just enough to close the distance without overwhelming, his presence a steadying anchor in the storm of her own desire and fear. The night deepened, the barn shadows lengthened, and the delicate tension between them reached a crescendo, one that neither words nor actions could fully capture, existing only in the trembling between hesitation and indulgence. The moon had risen high, spilling pale light through the cracks of the barn walls, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the hay-strewn floor. The air was electric, charged with anticipation and the subtle hum of unspoken desires. Her body still trembled uncontrollably, a storm of emotion and adrenaline coursing through her veins. Each heartbeat was loud, a drum echoing in the quiet barn, marking the rhythm of the dangerous intimacy between them. The rancher moved with deliberate care, leaning closer, his presence both commanding and protective. Every movement was intentional, designed to test the boundaries without shattering them. He traced gentle lines along her arm, her side, coaxing reactions from her that made her gasp and shiver. She tried to pull back, her voice quivering as she whispered, I can't. Yet her body betrayed her again, responding to his measured touch with a mix of fear, anticipation, and longing. He paused, studying her face in the dim light, reading the turmoil in her eyes, the wild tremor of her lips, the flush rising in her cheeks. It's all right, he murmured, low and steady, grounding her. The simplicity of the words was a lifeline in the storm of her own emotions. She wanted to argue, to reclaim control, but her mind and body were in discord. caught in the tension between resisting and surrendering to the irresistible force before her. Her back pressed against the rough wooden post once more, and he let his hands rest lightly on her shoulders, waiting, sensing the perfect moment to advance. She trembled, but it was no longer just fear. It was a fragile mix of exhilaration and desire, a surrender that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. His gaze locked on hers, unwavering, commanding yet tender, communicating an unspoken promise that whatever unfolded, she was safe, even as she crossed the limits she thought she would never reach. The barn seemed to hold its breath with them, the quiet punctuated only by their shallow breaths and the soft rustle of hay under their feet. Every brush of his fingers against her skin sent shocks of electricity through her, each touch carefully measured, building anticipation rather than overwhelming it. She trembled wildly, every nerve alight, yet she no longer tried to stop the pull between them. The resistance she clung to had melted away, leaving only raw, consuming tension. He leaned in closer, his face mere inches from hers. Her breath hitched, eyes fluttering closed. As the intensity of the moment enveloped her, she could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, a grounding force against the chaos of her own racing pulse. His hands, warm and steady, continued their careful exploration, coaxing a surrender that was as thrilling as it was terrifying. The barn shadows wrapped around them like a cloak, hiding the world outside while magnifying every tremor, every gasp, every whispered word. "You're trembling," he whispered again, and this time, she didn't try to deny it. Instead, she leaned into the moment, letting the trembling take over, a manifestation of her complete, unguarded surrender. The tension between them had reached a peak, a delicate balance of desire, trust, and fear that neither words nor actions could fully contain. Every touch, every whisper, every glance pushed her closer to the edge of something she had never known before. Time seemed to stretch, each second lingering as they navigated the fragile dance between hesitation and indulgence. The rancher's movements were masterful, responsive to every shiver, every gasp, every subtle shift in her body. She trembled wildly. Yet it was no longer a tremor of fear alone. It was the physical manifestation of surrender, trust, and the electrifying intensity of the connection that bound them in that quiet, shadowed barn. Finally, as the moonlight shifted and the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, the tension slowly began to ebb. He drew back slightly, giving her space, yet remaining close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. She leaned against him, breathless, trembling, not just from fear or desire, but from the emotional intensity of what had unfolded. The barn, once a backdrop for hesitation and restraint, now held the memory of a night suspended between longing and fulfillment, a night that neither of them would ever forget. Her eyes met his, and in that glance was a quiet acknowledgement, a mix of relief, exhilaration, and something unspoken, a bond forged in the tremors of the night. She had crossed a boundary, yet in doing so, discovered something profound about trust, desire, and the raw intensity of connection. The rancher gave her a small, knowing smile, and for the first time she allowed herself to tremble fully, freely, without fear. As the shadows of the barn receded and the first light of morning embraced them both, the trembling finally subsided, leaving only the echo of what had passed, the memory of every touch, every gasp, every electric second shared in the intimate, charged silence of the barn. And though the moment had ended, its imprint lingered, a quiet reminder of the intensity of surrender, the thrill of crossing limits, and the unspoken understanding between two people who had navigated the wild tension between desire and restraint.